Now then, team, in this episode, I have a chat with Dr Sohail Hanif, who is the CEO of the National Zakat Foundation, or NZF. Sohail is a scholar, he's an academic, he is a teacher through and through, and he's also my former boss. And I spent a little bit of time at NZF where I really saw that teaching coming through into his leadership. In this episode, we talk about zakat, the third pillar of Islam, and what it means. We talk about a very specific moment in Islamic charities' calendars, which results in almost all organisational income for the year funneling into a very short window of time. We talk about the pressure that has on the team, but also some of the good things that pressurised environment brings. We also talk about saying no and how Sohail navigates making difficult decisions. And we also talk about how we can all engage better with diaspora communities. So grab a brew, enjoy the conversation, see you in a bit. Sohail, welcome to Causes. How are you?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm well, and you?
Really good. Yeah, we acknowledged before the show started that it's been a long day, and this is an evening recording, so we'll try and stay sharp with our words. Sohail, give me a 1-minute intro to you. Take that in a broad sense.
I am currently the Chief Executive of National Zakat Foundation, which is a faith-based charity distributing obligatory alms in Islam called zakat. Prior to this, my journey to my current role has been not through anything that sounds like CEOing or charitying in any formal sense. My background is all in teaching in academia. I was a lecturer in Islamic law at Cambridge Muslim College, before which I did my PhD, before which I was in Jordan for 12 years, studying and teaching Arabic and Islamic studies. I did a degree in computer engineering, of which I've spent no time working whatsoever. That's my last 20 years working backwards, if that's a summary.
Brilliant. We'll get into the sort of career moments and things, but what is zakat? For people who don't know, what's zakat?
Yeah, so zakat is obligatory alms in Islam, alms ALMS, if there's anyone's confused. And it's 2.5% of surplus wealth if you're above a threshold that you pay to the needy every single year. Zakat is an Arabic word that means purification and growth, because we believe it leads to the purification of wealth and growth in many ways for the giver. There's particular rules regarding the recipients and the distribution, and our organization specializes in redistributing wealth within the United Kingdom.
So yeah, let's dive into a little bit about NZF, National Zakat Foundation, and what it exists to do, and why it was started.
Yeah, sure. So I've given a general overview of this item called zakat. And I can also say a little bit more to this, that to give a sense of global scale, I've not seen a good study of national scale, but in sense of global scale, the annual payment of zakat is anywhere between $450 billion and $1 trillion a year is paid annually all over the world in zakat. So it's a huge movement of wealth, which is why even many big international aid relief agencies, including United Nations agencies, are increasingly interested in having a zakat board and zakat certified programs, because it's such an important movement of annual wealth. Within the UK, the Muslim community are typically a diaspora community. So traditionally, all the annual zakat has been spent overseas. I might say zakat and zakat. Zakat is my English pronunciation. Zakat is the more Arabic one. So I'll sometimes flip between the two without realizing it. So in our diaspora community, traditionally the zakat's been paid overseas either to countries of origin where people have come from, in the 1 or 2 generations ago, or to other international relief programs. But the traditional rules about zakat actually speak about the importance of spending where you are. And so as this community is increasingly developing its roots within the United Kingdom, second generation, third generation, fourth generation families within the UK, we are becoming increasingly aware of the need of the local community where we are and the need to spend here. So NZF, National Zakat Foundation, was born 13 years ago, actually out of the stories primarily actually of homeless Muslim women in Birmingham, victims of domestic violence. And so that kind of gave birth to this organization. We've been through various stages of development in the kind of programs that we support, but the things that's been consistent throughout is that we only collect from within the UK, and we spend only within the United Kingdom. And that's what we're trying to develop: local faith community, giving, solidarity, belonging, and giving back.
Yeah, great. What are the trends that you see in terms of need and hardship, and how does NZF sort of be part of being there for those trends and helping? What are the patterns that you're seeing, and what are you trying to do specifically? What hardships specifically and sort of stats are the UK Muslim communities facing?
Yeah, so what we can say first of all is that over the last 3 years since I've been in my position, there's been a constant increase in need in our communities, where we always say this year broke the record of people asking for help, and then the next year breaks the record. So last Ramadan, which is the holy month of fasting when most Muslims give their zakat, last Ramadan we had one application for help every 3 minutes for a team at the size of, let's say, 30 odd. Not a national emergency unit, organized. It's a lot of movement, a lot of people asking, and that broke all of the records. Prior to which the year before was once every 12 minutes. You said, oh my goodness, this has never happened before. And the year before that, once every 20 minutes. And I was told just last week, currently in December, which is not even that high time of Ramadan, when people are more aware that money is being distributed and people can ask for, we're already at the 1 in 3 minutes. We've already reached our maximum ever in what's normally a quieter period. And so what I'm trying to get at is, this one very simple stat, is just to show really, and this corresponds to, I think, everybody who offers emergency support provision in grassroots settings, whether it's food banks, whether it's mosques, whether it's churches, anyone who's really on the front line will tell you that need is constantly increasing in our country. I had a very strange set of stats the other day about a quarter of the UK population technically being in poverty. I had another stat the other day about 40% of kids going to school hungry. And so it's just, there is a situation which we can analyze politically why it's there. But the truth of the matter is that our nation in general, we do have an increasing poverty crisis. Gordon Brown, again, there's just the UK population before I go into I think about the Muslim population. This Gordon Brown, I remember he released an article. It was under a year ago, and he was just commenting on the poverty crisis about children in homes with tables without food on them, and that it will be the defining crisis of our generation, how we manage to carry on living and not, do enough about this. And so there is something under the surface that many of us ignore and pretend is not happening because we're not confronted with it. But it's definitely there. Now, we specialize in catering to the Muslim community. So all that we see of this national picture is something slightly more dire, just because the Muslim community is the poorest faith community within the UK. They're the most generous in many metrics, but also the poorest faith community. And so that the needs are, if you can say, exemplified or amplified rather. We cater a lot to the asylum community as well, many of whom come from Muslim countries, many of whom you're aware of the political rhetoric around asylum seekers and what kind of help they get and what kind of difficulties they're in. So we see, if you like, a particular segment of UK poverty with a faith community that's disproportionately reflected in poverty indexes. But these are some of the stories, both with asylum seekers and also with UK nationals who otherwise, very frequently, ordinary lives, somebody becomes sick, they go into debt, and then they're spiraling into a poverty circle. So we see things like that a lot.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's enough shared learning across organisations who are all focused on possibly individually supporting communities? Like, do you feel like there's a layer of, you know what, I'm going to share something that worked really well?
I'd probably have to say yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
On the whole, the simple answer is not enough. This is the summary of it. I think what happens is we have our large established projects, like your Joseph Rowntree, like your Trussell Trust, who are doing well, fair share. You know, there's a few of these very well established projects. But there's so many projects that are specializing in support for youth, and you know, there's just so much happening that there certainly is not enough sharing. And I'm fortunate whenever I do go to some of these events, we do find lots of common ground. Unfortunately, again, part of the reason is that most of these charity projects have their own funding restrictions. Everyone's trying to just get by within what they have to make the greatest impact that they can. And it takes a bit of effort to raise your head above that work, to network, go out, share learnings, and then you need an appropriate team of partnership support and program redesign. And, you know, so there's a lot of stuff that's required to have high quality cross-sector organization. There are some good efforts, good conversations. I've made some very good links through the Centre for London, which is a think tank for matters to do with London. I met some very good people through meetings at the Trussell, led by the Trussell Trust and a few others. But all I'd say is I think more is required, because there's so many ways we can amplify each other, not just on the level of third sector, the charity projects, but also on the level of government as well. Government at all levels, I think, is increasingly aware of the need to partner with community-based, community-led projects. And I think it's finding the right nodes to make those partnerships is very important. We've had some very good conversations with MP officers who felt that we can actually help them, offer people something concrete to come to them for help. And we're trying to put together some program for a number of these MP officers, especially with a Muslim-dense population, that we could support them. We local governments. So, you know, there's a number of local councils teetering on the verge of bankruptcy in this country. This is the truth of it. Struggling to reach hard-to-reach communities. And so for some of them, in some early conversations we've had, there's a sort of natural possible partnership. Again, projects like ours, and there's many such projects, their main always barrier is about funding. Like I said, you maintain the main project, but a lot of this tailor-made design, how we could partner with supporting hard-to-reach communities in the local council, that needs a bit more growth. And so it's just finding those nodes of connecting funding, connecting third sector projects, and connecting government and third sector. I think there's something in there everyone knows is really important. And I think as a sector, we need to fine-tune.
Yeah, great. Let's shift gears a little bit to leadership. We'll come back onto community. But the question I'm asking everybody: what's good leadership to you?
Well, as you mentioned the word leadership, I remembered a definition from a course I took recently. I can't get it all right, and I didn't want me to memorize anything, but it just came to my head as he said the word, which was about influencing someone to go somewhere or do something when they would do neither by themselves. I find that's a fair definition just because it focuses on the word influence. If someone cannot influence people to move, then unfortunately, it does not appear they will be successful as leaders. They can manage projects, they can observe flows, they can do a lot of stuff. Very important, because every project needs every member equally, right? So it's not that a leader is more important to a success of a project than the team, but that's impossible. So everyone's important. But when you talk about leader, leading is the essential trait. But within that is this notion of influence. Influence, there's a few parts to it, but because you're influencing not just your team, you're influencing the public to support your work, which can include donors and can include all these conversations we've just had, right? Other people in the sector, governmental agents. And at the heart of that influence is a few things, a part of which is this clarity of vision, that where are we going? Why is it required? And I guess the ability to articulate that again and again and again and again and again and again, I think something about that does seem quite important. That's something which I think I've benefited from my long time actually in teaching. Long years actually in teaching all types of adults. I never taught children actually, but all forms of adult learning from university all till quite senior, and in between. So that I for me is quite important. But another part of influence is just knowing about people, because one can lay out the direction, but there's this other part about the barriers within people. How to communicate with people, how to communicate in a way that people can get what you're saying. That whole idea of movement becomes really important.
Mm-hmm.
The other part, which did not come naturally from teaching for me, because this first part I think did in many ways, but the second part, which is something I've had to understand more and more over the course of my time here, which is that you've laid out the direction, you've given people the impetus, you've spoken to them in a way that makes them excited and want to do something. But then the other part of it is translating that direction into some tangible achievement that people can aim for, and then giving people things they can track to ensure that they're going to the tangible achievement. This idea of translating down to goals and metrics, and then making sure these are tracked in a way that doesn't make them the point, because the point is still the direction, and in a way that doesn't make them rigid, because there might be in mid-journey a better way than the goal that was set earlier. But the idea that everyone needs clarity in terms of what the achievement is for them and what the way to measure that is, that systematizing of movement, that seems quite central, I would say, as well. So that's just some initial thoughts that come to mind from your question.
Brilliant. I feel like I'm uniquely placed to have an opinion on this.
Of course.
Yeah, it's literally on my notes, what you said around teaching. I've never seen anywhere or anyone as good at bringing people along based on teaching. Like I remember vividly the all staff sessions where it was like, we're going to focus on something that you might not know around zakat or around anything, and it was a very open sort of, you would ask collaborative questions of all people. I really feel like it was a unique and special way of bringing people with you, actually. So I would say it's very evident to me that the teaching part of your journey plays a huge role in being able to lead NZF forward. Speaking of taking NZF forward, what inspired you to take the role?
What inspired me to take the role is a few things. Partly intellectual, partly developmental, and partly, you could say, irrational.
Why irrational?
I said irrational.
Why irrational?
Well, I've got to do the other parts first.
Okay, go.
But the part that's intellectual is that I spent the 4 years prior as a lecturer on Islamic law at a very interesting program in Islamic studies at Cambridge Muslim College. It was a program designed to train future theologians, but the idea was at the heart of it, people who've been trained in traditional Islamic disciplines with the tools of modern conversation to really think hard about the role of faith in today's and tomorrow's society, basically. And so I was teaching medieval law. And so we were constantly grappling with quite fine questions about, well, what does all of this mean? What was it about then? And what might it possibly be about now? Bringing in various forms of history and textualizing and legalizing and other forms of inquiry. And one of the things that entered my heart was that this discipline, I call it Islamic law, but at the heart of it, it's a vision for community building. It's a vision for community institutions. And I didn't feel enough people were talking about it in that way. Most conversations about it are about me, the personal, what can I do and what can I not do? But it's not really primarily a personal code, as far as I felt by the end of that time. It was primarily a communal code, and it had a communal consequence. And it just felt that, and at the time, I felt that my role was to produce students who'd go out in the world and build something great. I didn't think at the time that would be my role. My role, I thought, was in the classroom. I could do the teaching. I can do the thinking. I know these texts very well. I can produce people, smart young people who can go out. So it was never my job. My job was to build people, to do that. That was that. But then, what can I say? I've been very close to NZF since I was doing my PhD. It's just before I had that job. I was a year and a half. I was a part-time head of research and development, very, very close to the project. And just this opportunity sort of came to enter the project in this way. And that goes to my second reason. I called it developmental. The developmental part was just, I had increasingly started taking a further angle, and you could call it my spiritual journey, which was just increasingly aware of the need to be interested in the person of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, God bless him and give him peace, not just as someone who delivered a message, but as somebody who embodied that message. The final message of God to man is how we see it. And so he is the message. And I felt that I had to improve who I was to be closer to that ideal. And what that entailed, you see, I was in this track of life. I call it the lifelong student. Do you know student life? Do you know how you were at university?
Mm-hmm. I was there for a very short amount of time.
Student life is, I'll sleep when I want, I'll do this when I want, I have great ideas. You develop half of yourself, you don't develop the other half of yourself. If you think about the other opposite of being out in the world, being with people, pushing out. So I just realized that I'm half developed, and I'll probably stay half developed for the rest of my life if I stay as I am. And I just felt like if I put myself into a different space, it would push me to trim parts of my behavior that need to be trimmed, because it's another kind of way to be in the world, and you have to present differently, you have to deal differently with issues. It felt like a completion of one's human experience. And it felt like that is correct. If I want to go towards this ideal of a perfect human, if you like, which is what I believe about the Prophet and the prophets of God in general, then I needed to do something bigger. So then part of it is the intellectual journey that we need to build institutions. I felt I had a narrative that draws from a wide tradition of learning that many people don't have. So I felt I had that. And I felt I had this opportunity that I could do this. And I went through a very odd phase of reading management books out loud to a friend of mine back in Jordan for no reason whatsoever. I developed this interest with the books of Jim Collins. I found them personally very inspiring, actually. So I had this little background there. And the last part, I call it the irrational, right? It's just, you can't quantify it because it's not similar to the past. And it's not teaching, and it's not ideas, and it's not people who celebrate those ideas the way that I've been around, being around academics. It's a very strange thing to socialize into. When you meet someone, you say, "Oh, what do you work on?" He say, "Oh, I work on 6th century texts from this period." I say, "Oh, that's very interesting. What?" So it's a very different kind of space, very niche sort of art space is the intellectual or the academic. So there always has to be this irrational part, which is just something tells me that I think this feels right, and I can't 100%. This is the full arc of it. That's in terms of my side. In terms of, if you like, coming forward for this.
Talk to me about how you felt on day one of being chief executive at
So there's 2 day ones in this story. Because what happened was, when I started, I actually was a deputy chief executive. And I knew that, if all went well, that, there would be, I'd become the chief executive. So in the whole first period, I generally stayed quiet. That was the suffering of it, because I was observing meetings with the CEO and the directors and the staff, and I was just getting to know people, talking to people. A lot of learning, a lot of listening, a lot of observing, a lot of finding the time to when I should speak, and if I speak, and someone says, "What are you talking about?" because it sounded off to them. And so you kind of have to break through that period, especially because you feel that there's a sort of leadership around the original leader, and you kind of come in and you're not like the original leader because you're just another person, a completely different human being. And then there's this idea of intrigue, acceptance, but could it become rejection? And, you kind of have to balance that to kind of come in the middle of that. So it was definitely tricky. A lot of support again from the last chief executive, very, very good friend, and a lot of very, very good support I got from him.
Do you think there's a time where you go back to teaching full time?
Very difficult question. So when I joined, in my mind, my ideal retirement was to go back to where I was before I joined, because I love teaching and I love writing. And by writing, I just mean sharing ideas, basically. Creating ideas, sharing ideas in this space of, you could say, law, but law is a very hard thing to put your finger on. You could say it's legal ethics, you could say it's theology, you could say it's society and economy. All of that comes into the sphere of what I call Islamic law. A bit of psychology comes into it as well. So the creating of ideas and sharing them through writing and teaching, that's always where I see my sort of comfort place. It's where I want to be when I retire. It's where I feel I might be able to give my greatest contributions. To this day, I feel that my greatest personal contribution, I still think, is going to be in the place of ideas, which means I need to make sure I make time for that. Having said that, coming into this space, it's forced me to share ideas with a general public in a way that I never did before. Because when you're teaching, you're in niche spaces. 10 students here, a group of interested people there, academic conference there. Whereas in my current role, I have opportunities to do thought leadership, but in a much more wider public-facing way, which is another kind of skill set, or another kind of challenge, which I've enjoyed a lot. And so there definitely needs to be, and the other thing is I do some teaching still, like I do some advanced classes on Sunday night. Sunday night from 6 to 10 p.m. is I tell people, is feel good about myself hours in the week, because I teach these very advanced texts right in the space of where I've been specializing. A very intelligent international group of students. We have fabulous conversations, and I feel really good about myself in terms of the human element of, this was really good, a really good workout. If I was like in a gym, that's what it would feel like. It feels really good.
How would you describe the organisational culture at NZF?
So there's things in the culture that we're very proud about, and there's things in the culture that we think we need to improve. So the things that we're quite proud about is that we are passionate about what we do. We do believe in it. We have a very large number of people who are willing to go above and beyond because it's not a job. And I think many charities and many people you'll interview will have something similar to this, because for most people, it's a sort of pay cut and every other else kind of, cut to come into the charity space. It's not competitive with the corporate and other sectors. So people typically come here for a passion. And so working with passionate people, we have great grand narratives about what we're building, what it can mean, and we make quite good transformative steps that we're very proud of and we're very grateful for. And so there's something in our culture, it's this point of belief or faith. It moves us, it unites us, it inspires us, and it creates a baseline for us to come together if there's been a split or a disagreement or something of that. So that's something I think that's quite important to us. Another part of our culture, which we're good and we want to do better as well, we call it empowerment in terms of our organizational value. But what it means is we want to empower people we interact with through the engagement with us. That includes our new work. I said I want to create community nodes where people can find support within community. That's actually us empowering mosques to offer this support, because people are uncertain. How do you handle cash giving in a mosque? How do you have due diligence? How do you handle zakat? There's sort of phobia about touching zakat with its rules. We empower people to help their own. That's the idea. It's our community. It's your community. We have to do this work together. We empower volunteers in these communities to train up people who otherwise might be professionals, otherwise might be, in other roles in life. We train them up so that they can run clinics in their local centers where they can assess people, understand their needs, and give them support. That's quite transformative for them. They never have done anything like that. And again, it's empowering. We like to think that we're empowering people through our zakat grants, and similarly, internally, empowering each other. We had an innovation lab, come up with the ideas. Let's consider these ideas. Let's give ideas space to breathe. Let's not be overly rigid about what we think is the right way. If people can do things better, let's have that conversation. We have that. We've had good wins in that, but I know we can do that better as well. Empowering the internal creativity. Respectful is one of our organizational values as well, which is just that whether it's our dealings with each other, there is a baseline of respect that is always there. It really sticks out if we've had an odd, tense interaction. Tense interactions are needed and healthy, but there's this baseline of respect that's quite palpable, quite clear, and it's quite important. People feel respected, valued, dignified within the workplace, and we feel it's the core of zakat. Because all of our work, whether it's through the mosques, whether it's with the recipients, whether it's whatever, the whole point of the work is to tell people you're valued members of the community. You don't have to suffer in silence. The way we look at zakat is an obligatory giving to somebody in need. So no one's doing a favor to the needy person. The needy person is doing a favor to the rich person by allowing them to discharge their duty. So the power balance is quite sensitive to be managed well. That this is a respectful exchange. It's not in any way putting someone down. So these are some things we're committed to continuous learning, as you said, to always make sure that we're in a learning environment, learning about the work that we're doing as well. These are some things I said that come to mind about what we like about where we work.
Yeah. All of that the respect thing, the being able to have difficult conversations, but it being rooted in respect, and I feel like it was my time at NZF was I think it's quite rare actually in organisations to have such a level of togetherness. I would say that yes, I agree about the charity sector is full of people who are driven by the cause, but it's not always. Not every organisation is full of people who really are interested in being in that particular organisation for that particular cause. And at NZF, I felt like it absolutely was. People were there because they wanted to be there, which I think was really special. One thing that it does link to the team and it does link to organisational culture, but this is something that's stuck with me ever since being at NZF. And I might get the stat wrong because it's been a minute. Wow. I've got it on my notes over here. 90% of organisational income comes during Ramadan. 90% of that comes.
75.
Is it 75?
Something, yes,
but basically, the thing I'm getting at is like 75% happens within a month.
A 4-week period.
Yeah. Then
and of that,
of that 90% comes in the last 10 nights. And of that, 90% of that is in basically a single night. So you have this basically a single night where your entire organisation, essentially, like not everything, but most of the stuff is happening in a matter of hours, which for me is different to most organisations I've worked in. There might be an intense 3 weeks, but it's never like 24 hours kind of thing. So my question about this and how it links to team is, how are you supporting the team in what is inevitably going to be a very high pressure situation, and the stakes are as high as they get, basically.
Yeah, no, that's very, very good. It's quite funny because, so first of all, the reason why that happens, in case people are wondering, is that Ramadan is a month Muslims in their popular psyche, it's not from the rules though, but in the popular psyche, it's a month where people like to give their zakat. And then the last 10 days of Ramadan are considered the most blessed of the month. And within that, the odd nights are considered the most blessed. So now we're down to 5. And of that, the last few have a particular sort of significance. And so that's where you get this channeling of funds into a very narrow period. It is stressful. I had a gentleman who wanted to help me work through remember I told you about metrics and goals and how to track everything in the organization on a weekly basis. And he just realized how difficult it was, because I said, imagine we're a toy company and all our sales happen in Christmas. So how are you going to measure the income all year long and know that you're on track? Because you'll never know until the end of Christmas whether you're on track. That's what's so odd about this. You're working hard. You were in marketing, right? You were making videos, working hard, circulating. There's movement, but you'll never know until it comes to an end what exactly happened. So it's an interesting form of project. This is the first part. Puts a lot of stress on technology, a lot of stress on systems, a lot of stress on the support team. If givers had any issues, there are some very dedicated team members who are literally 24/7 available to make sure that this is safe, out of their goodwill, really, because it's not always in our power to say you must work 24 hours on this day or the other day, but out of pure dedication and goodwill, may God bless them. They're really always in the high stress period, they make themselves available. We've got obviously the team doing the messaging, marketing. I typically, in those 10 days, I just go a bit irrational myself. And what I mean by that is, I've done it almost all the last 3 years, Ramadans in a row. I call it going on the road. I don't even know always what I'm doing. You met me in Manchester once. I kind of just went and I see what opportunities come. So this last Ramadan, I just went on the road. I messaged a few friends in Birmingham, a few gyms in Manchester, saying, I'm coming. Are there any talks that we could organize? And it became a full-on thing, midnight talk in Keighley, this talk over here at this time, this in Bradford, this in Manchester, this in Rochdale. But there was no structure. I mean, the structured events had finished, you see. And I just felt this is the time when people are going to be willing to listen. And this is my prime time to deliver my message. So I you could call it leading from the front, because you can't actually solve, you can't we don't work in a physical office again, right? You can't be massaging everyone like we're all in the same room, buying them pizzas, buying them cake, and here's here's a movie, just relax for the cool. You're not in a physical space. Everyone's in their rooms, everyone's in their lives, constantly connected day and night everyone's sleeping in really weird hours, sleeping a bit in the morning, sleeping a bit here, sleeping a bit there. You don't know, in the high pressure period, everyone's got their sleep around the clock, people who are out actually on this, on the front line. So the most of the prep is just coming into the month, and then how we all year long maintain our morale. Otherwise, actually in the high pressure periods, I do my own self version of high pressure and just sort of get the message out as best as I can, as many communities as I can, to as many people as I can. That's how it goes. It's a very strange thing to describe. You can't put your finger on it. It's highly charged, highly energetic, highly spiritual, very fulfilling, quite exhausting, and you're fasting the whole time, because it's a month of fasting. So all of this is, you're fasting as well. So your sleep, eat, and drink is not normal. No word can express what this is, but all I can say is there's nothing like this feeling. That's all. That's the summary. That's the best I can do.
Yeah. You know what it taught me about was, I think it taught me about pace, and I felt this, like, I don't know, like adrenaline kind of thing throughout it. I feel like it was, there are all those intensity sort of ramp ups, but there's also, in a way, like an intensity of the closeness of the team during that time as well. Like, I feel like without that, that's a huge part of my sort of cherished memories, is that specific time. Cool. All right. So, moving on to engaging with communities, we sort of touched on it earlier, but how can other organisations and the government better engage with diaspora communities to advise their humanitarian and international work? One of the reasons, Sohail, that I'm asking this is I had somebody on the show who's been in UN humanitarian systems, and she was saying it's outrageous that governments aren't speaking more to diaspora communities, because the amount of advice that they could get for international situations is huge, and it's being overlooked. Have you got any thoughts on that?
No, that's huge. What they said, that's absolutely correct. I just think that there was an impression that the last government wasn't engaging enough with grassroots projects, in addition to what you're saying about the diaspora. I think this government coming in wanted to do more, but I think they're finding their feet. The issue with these things is, actors change, and, I think a focus on local government and, like I said, government in all of its levels, I think is important. I think there is a recognition that our public services are really strained, really struggling, and there's a natural partnership between what we can call the third sector, the charity sector, civil society sector, various terms, and the government and businesses. There's a lot of businesses, by the way. One thing I've seen in this time is how many wealthy people and wealthy business owners want to do more. There's this growth in charitable foundations of people trying to strategically spend. And so there's a lot of non-governmental actors who increasingly are trying to increase their UK-based footprint. Like, there's an idea that there are needs here, And there's great consequence if we get the formula right where we are. And so it's just for government to understand that their best chance of success is in partnering. There are many actors in government who realize this, but the machine of government is not always that fast. And many people in the grassroots and civil society projects that realize this, not all of them are invited to the table. Not all of them know how to get to the table. Not all of them know what they have the ability to ask for. And so there's a need to educate civil society in its broadest meaning.
Yeah. How do you navigate the sort of tension between short-term, immediate support versus longer-term sort of development support sort of thing? Like, where does NZF sit on that? Where does sort of zakat teachings fall on that in terms of, yes, urgent versus foundational help going forward?
Yeah, that's an ongoing question. At one level, all of zakat is, you could say, immediate, in as much as it has to be paid every year and given to somebody who deserves it in every year. So most Islamic authorities would frown upon investing zakat funds for long-term returns on investment. We say that's for another type of institution. Zakat needs to circulate amongst hands. So that there's something immediate about that idea. It's always money circulating amongst hands. It's not going to be going away into long-term infrastructure projects. So there's something about the human. Because at the heart of the zakat is an interaction between people. A sense that the faith community is there for you, a sense you find belonging in the faith community. And so the human immediate element defines a lot of what happens with zakat. After that, in terms of the rules of zakat, it's commonly stated that there are 8 categories of recipient mentioned in the Holy Quran, some of whom are highlighted for their extreme poverty. Others are highlighted because of various forms of need or service that they're able to offer. So in the broader conversation of zakat, it covers both the immediate poverty relief and the empowering someone to support some form of public service, where they all agree is it's the human element, i.e. not infrastructure, not long-term investment, but annual movement of wealth between human beings. That's at the heart of the zakat. So I'll say zakat rules speak to both of what you've said, the immediate relief and the longer-term empowerment of people. At NZF, we only help people who are classified as poor with a particular metric that we have, and we help them with immediate needs, which is through our hardship relief program, which is a cash giving program, and our housing program. And we also give them a ladder to longer-term self-sustainability in our empowerment program, which is paying for people to get trained, to get into employment. We pay for people to convert qualifications. It might be an asylum seeker who used to be a dentist in Syria. We'll pay for that conversion course so the person can practice here in the UK. It could be buying tools that have helped people to have their trade and deal with customers. So we do have both levels, which is the immediate relief and the empowerment so people can stand on their own 2 feet. But I definitely would say the bulk of the work we have is with the immediate relief.
When it comes to there's NZF can't do everything. You don't have infinite amounts of sort of pounds in the bank. So the question I've got for you as a leader is your relationship with saying no. So I'm not talking about organisationally saying no to an applicant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about Sohail. What's your relationship with saying no been? Have you had to develop it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at one level, what really helps is where we started off with, right, which is laying out the direction. Because if you set the boundaries, because it doesn't seem strong for a leader to say no without being able to justify that. Because the point is, people have to see that there's some thinking, consistency, clarity in decision making. Everyone deserves the respect of understanding a thought process. So the no has to be led by some clarity. And the best clarity is defining well across the organization what our priorities are. Where are we going? What is the future? What are we trying to build? That internally leads to most of the clarity in terms of what's in and out. And I think that makes a lot of our decision making clear. And so that's all I'll say, that depending on, if you lay out boundaries, we already know roughly what's in and out. This is the most important thing. So it's not like random decisions and random ideas. I do like to make sure that everyone who has a right to weigh in on a topic has the right to be invited to discuss it and understand it. I think this leads to safer and sounder decision making. It leads to greater ownership of the final decision, leads to greater respect for the final decision. And I try to maintain that wherever possible.
Broad, ambiguous question, but what's the most, doesn't have to be NZF, the most difficult decision in a leadership role that you've made?
I met a guy, well, he was not just a normal guy. He actually started many projects, many charities, a sort of leader in this space. And he knew that I came from my teaching background. He wanted to ask me, how's everything going? And the way he asked me was, have you fired anyone yet? That was his way to know. It's like, have you tasted blood? Like, do you know what this is all about? So I'd say those conversations are the hardest. And there was some significant conversations in line with this that had to happen, which I think were challenging, needed some planning, needed some thinking, and some delivery. So there's this part. Another part I found quite challenging is being an arbiter or arbitrator in disputes. So if there's been a grievance of some sort, to then hear an appeal and to make sure it's been fair, to suspend your personal judgment, to look at the evidence, listen to everybody out, follow a due process. I've had to do that maybe twice. So I think those two are challenging, because you have to show, in the appeals side, you have to show fairness, you have to show due process, you have to get expert to make sure that you follow everything cleanly. And in the conversations about letting people go, that's also difficult. But what made that easy for me in the time that I've been here is what I talked about, this culture of, you could say, dedication, stroke faith, stroke respect. That even a conversation that is difficult, at its baseline, there was genuine mutual respect throughout, and it made this quite possible. The other thing that made it quite manageable for me was the wonderful, I think, support structure that I have. The chair of our board, he's most excellent support and mentor for me. Some other mentors as well. So it's just, the support structure has been very helpful. The people are genuinely decent, and so even if you have to do a difficult conversation, there's this bed of decency that sort of upholds however low something can get. That really has been very, very helpful, I think, in my time here.
Yeah. Final question, and then a couple of rapid ones. What strategies do you sort of deploy personally when you're facing sort of challenges like external misconceptions or sort of societal prejudices about your work?
Well, one of my top priorities is addressing a particular one of these in this year with a particular segment of people. There was before I joined, there was a particular decision the charity had made that lasted for about a year and a half. and it already finished before I joined, but it led to some mistrust in the community. So there are some people even today that say don't trust NZF, they do zakat in X way, but we don't actually. But it's a legacy of this old conversation. So I do my absolute best to tackle this, but it just needs lots of conversations head on. I do like meeting people. I do like presenting. I do feel that if I have the chance to present, people, their hearts change. It was very funny. You know, my very first Ramadan, right, which was maybe 6 months into my being a CEO, right? So it's the first big test in public of this new CEO coming in after quite a charismatic leader who's been associated with this project since the beginning. So how would people respond to me? That was the big confusion. Or not, doubt, self-doubt, what's it going to feel like? And I did the whole going on the street and giving talks and doing all types of interesting things. And when I came out of that Ramadan, I told a friend of mine, I said, I've realized I've got only one skill that I've brought to this job. But I said the skill is that I felt that when I speak, people trust me. That's what I felt, whether it was speaking with donors or speaking with a large crowd in a mosque, for example, or speaking to someone who's on the fence about what we do, or speaking to, the various subsection of people that I have to speak to in my role. I felt that engendering trust was something, just people finding trust was something I found throughout these engagements in my first 6 months. And so that gave me a lot of confidence. And so I don't have a strategy like a technique, if that's what you mean by your question, but it's just the fact of talking to people. Whether it's, I enjoy presenting like to a group, I enjoy that whole coming into act as as someone speaking to a group or a crowd. I enjoy the one-to-one. I'm very awkward with the small talk. I told someone, when you bump into someone like somewhere and you do the small talk, I'm so awful at small talk. But other than small talk, where I'm quite self-conscious that I can't do it well, everything else, and just getting on with somebody, or all of that. So I've got no techniques, but I know just making time for people and talking to them is extremely important. And because the biggest thing I have to do is really build these bridges in our community, and wherever there's a possible friction, the only technique, if I can say, is making time, listening to people, sharing, responding to them, sharing answers, understanding their concerns. I never found a conversation that was insurmountable, or a chasm that was too big to cross. I never felt I've left a conversation where there's been animosity.
Mm-hmm.
I felt I've seen people charged and negative, and we've been all right by the end of the conversation. So it's just, you do this a few times and you feel this confidence that it's okay. As long as we talk, we will get somewhere better than we've started with.
Yeah.
So there's no techniques, but it's just the fact of talking, I think is very, very important. There's no replacement for it. It's not that you can put out a post on Facebook and the world will be okay. You literally have to make time for people. There's no actual other way about it.
Yeah. I mean, I've witnessed this. I call it the Sohail magic. I remember Cambridge Mosque. You just have a way of you have a knack. You have something. Do you get nervous in front of big crowds?
However much I've done something, I get very nervous until fractionally before I start.
Mm-hmm.
But it vanishes as soon as I start speaking. It's very rare that I'm nervous once I've started speaking. It might have happened twice. I'm trying to remember right now. And you always tell because I'm drinking water, I get very thirsty. But when you're nervous, but it's very rare. But definitely in the build up to it and the whole morning, depending on what the nature of the event is, sometimes it just rolls off very quickly. But if there's something I feel is quite serious, a new talk, a new idea, a new presentation, new kind of group, and something different, then the whole day prior, I almost can do nothing else. I never write a script. I never know exactly what I'm saying because I don't know how to prepare like that. That's why I stay almost confused until the moment. I know things that are important to me. I try to imagine a pathway right into the last second, how I'm going to start and what the the logical pathway, not what the words are, but what the logic is, how 1 leads to 2, to 3, to 4. But the talk will have 10. I'll never plan all 10. I'll just plan how 1 goes to 4. So I just know how I'm going to go into my topic. And I know roughly what the themes are. And I just imagine it. I never make a script because in the moment I might do it differently. I just need to know the logic.
Mm-hmm.
And because I need to do that, and I never actually do it formally, it just gets very heavy in the day. So I can't really do a lot of other stuff. If I have to, then I will. But it's just this discomfort in the run-up. That's not abnormal, actually. Depending on the event. Other things, like I said, I can just roll off. But as soon as I start speaking, normally then I'm fine.
Yeah.
That's the summary of it.
A phone company comes to you and says, we're going to facilitate a text message to everyone. So you've got the limitations of a text message. It's the character limit. It's a short message to all people facing hardship around the world. What's the text message saying?
It's very challenging. And the reason why, I'm going to add commentary before I fire on this one. It's because in my experience, I've been operating within this, I could say, a faith space. I do believe, like I said earlier, if we get our space right, the benefits will reach out to all types of people, faith and non-faith and other faith. And I'm quite conscious of the positionality and how it supports the wider society. But my own expertise has been in a faith space, which means that if I'm writing to people of faith, I will have to mention God in that message. And I know that if it's going to every poor person in the world, that might not be fitting or might not land. That's why your question is quite challenging for me. Because you ultimately, when you're sending a message of hope, you want to send it in a way that people feel it speaks to them. So when you talk about everyone in the world, I feel like I've got to think quite hard about that. What will be inspiring? What will give you comfort? You have to give people hope. If you're not going to talk about God, I've not done that to the work that I've been doing. If I do talk about God, then it's, the very short message is just, it's not even talking, you're right, I have to think about the message, then I'll tell you what it is, but it's just something about, you are precious, we're a family, it's our duty to help you, you are our heroes. There'll be something along that, and the reason why, it goes back to this offsetting the power differential. There's this idea that we are here to help you because you need us. That power differential isn't healthy. It's more about the fact that you guys are heroes because you are pushing through a situation that's not easy. We value you, we respect you, we look up to you. We're not going to abandon you. And that's going to be the baseline. That can go all over the world. I think that's quite clear. And I'm just trying to think what would come on top of that baseline. But it's going to talk about, if I were talking in a faith space, it's just God is good. And everything we deal with, however difficult, is a means of rewards, forgiveness, rank. Only good comes from God, and we just have to realize His plan is greater and wiser and longer than our plans. And so we trust in God, but we are here for you, and we owe you everything.
Sohail, thank you so much for this conversation. Is there anything, before we wrap up, anything that's sort of on your minds that you wanna say? Thinking about, maybe there's people listening who are in the charity sector, interested in development, or just about the conversation we've had, whatever comes to mind.
I think something I've been hinting at throughout this conversation, I call it the need for communities to stand up. It's just that I feel that every difficult challenge is an opportunity. I mean, that's very important to see the opportunity in things. whatever I call the struggle or the challenge of our public services, which we want to do better, whatever we might call the struggle, the challenges, the falling short of government that we want them to do better, there's this gap that's necessarily being created that we have to step into. And it's a very ancient value, the value that we are responsible for our own, the value that family members are responsible for their own, neighbors are responsible for each other, whether it's faith groups, professional groups. That's the most ancient model of solidarity. You talked about leadership, but real leadership is not just tied to corporate structures or governmental structures. It's leadership. It's people who are empowered to coordinate public interests. It comes from us. So my only thing I'd say to everybody, there's an opportunity now to build, to create, to solve systemic problems which are now coming to the fore, which are all these challenges in society. We have to be creative. We have to think of new ways of living, new ways of being economic, new ways of being charitable, new ways of being communal, new ways of engaging with government. And so all I encourage people to do is step up, follow your heart, and there's just so much that we can do together and that we have to do together.